Universale Jeem Apologetics. This is, as always, your host, Jeem. Welcome to anybody who is new, some new subscribers. I've got some new subscribers in the last month or so. In fact, it's been progressively snowballing into more and more subs, so thank you guys for all the help and passing the message of Jeem along into the internet. And of course, welcome to all my old friends, the usuals, the regulars. This is the Jeem bar where everybody knows your name. Now, today we're going to be talking about the concept of trad and based. Is orthodoxy based and straight? Or is it in fact an illusion of modern Western caricature of a tradition? Which religions are trad and based compared to orthodoxy? How about our cousins in Rome, Roman Catholicism? We're going to discuss all of this, so this might be slightly longer, more boring episode. I'm debating whether or not I'm going to do a lot of editing in this one, like images and music or whatever. Well, I guess you'll find out when you're watching this. But the point is, this will be a longer, more kind of cut and dry episode on these issues because this is kind of serious. I'm not going to do like memes and stuff, so let's just get straight into it. As I discuss a lot on Twitter and even Discord with friends of different denominations or even friends and not so much friends of different religions, there is always the concept that comes up. Whenever I announce that I'm Orthodox or other people are Orthodox and they're having these discussions, I always notice that people immediately attack Orthodoxy and go, you're not as trad as you think. You're not as based as you think. Look at this article. Look at Elpidorphos and this gay baptism thing. And I always see that pop up like instantaneously. And I don't see it pop up as much when people are debating Protestants and Roman Catholics. Maybe Muslims will bring these points up if they're not as knowledgeable of the difference between denominations. But when we're having an atheist or even an inter-Christian debate, anytime the Orthodox shows up, they have to attack his tradness. And then anytime there's a Catholic or a Prot, they don't seem to do that. And I think the reason for this is possibly because Protestantism and Catholicism do not claim to be this new revival. What they're trying to do is to cling on to the tradition they already had and slow down the degeneracy which is happening massively in the West. Whereas with Orthodoxy, it's exploding in popularity. You have all these different conversions online. You have people who are watching Jay Dyer, or Muslims who watch Orthodox Shahada, or people who are watching like Jonathan Pajot, and just a bunch of channels where Orthodoxy's prime center. And there are a lot of people who learn from Orthodoxy online. Then, of course, they go and attend a liturgy, and they're blown away by the beauty of it, and they decide, hey, I'm going to become a catechumen. And so this has been exploding in popularity throughout the West. And I've mentioned a few times before, mainly on Twitter and social media, but also in a couple of my videos. So I guess when an Orthodox appears, there's this assumption that, hey, that guy believes he's super trad and based. We got to attack him with an article of a random perverted person who is not based, or look at this map of abortion in Russia. And so I'd like to handle all these issues right now. I notice that they are brought up, and it's almost always the same exact argument, so I'm going to try to debunk them one by one. We're going to start with the age-old abortion Russia map. And this also applies to alcoholism, suicide, and other things that are found in Russia. Let's get a few things first. Russia and Russian Orthodox Christians are approximately 40% of all Eastern Orthodox Christians on earth. So anybody who says, well, Orthodoxy is not Russian, that's going to sound like coke to someone who is arguing against you. Because it's as if I said, well, Catholicism is not all about Latin America, even though there's 600 million Latino Catholics, maybe 500 million, I don't know. It's an enormous part of the religion. It's an enormous part of the community, I should say, the Russian Orthodox. So we can't deny that Russia is an important part of what it means to be Orthodox on the internet. We're talking about our faith, Russia will be mentioned. So don't use the argument, well, Russia isn't Orthodoxy. You can use that argument if someone's pulling the ethnic card and saying, well, you're not Russian or Greek. Well, that doesn't matter. So universal church. But we can get into that as well. But when someone is specifically attacking the morality of Russia and saying, look, here's your biggest Orthodox nation, you keep talking about this based Putin guy, and yet look at the horrors coming out of Russia. It's like the end of Apocalypse Now. And my response to that would be, as everybody is aware, or should be, Russia and the entirety of the Soviet Union was the heartland of a different ideology for almost a century known as communism. Communism had conquered about half of Europe. So half of Europe was under the boot of communism, as well as Russia itself. The Eurasian landmass known as Russia was under the boot of Europe, and Central Asia, which at that part had been designed by Stalin into the borders that we see today, or more or less the same borders. Communism absolutely eradicated religion for the better part of a century. Now, people could still be religious underground. One example that I see a lot is that people bring up Poland, which is now spectacularly Catholic compared to some Orthodox nations. And Poland was part of communism as well. So why is it that Poland was able to hang on to its religiosity, whereas Russia and Ukraine, even though they're reviving Orthodoxy, their morality has not been the same? And that's a great question for somebody who is Catholic, Protestant, or even a different religion who's talking about us and talking towards us about Orthodoxy. And the reason for that is that Catholicism went hand in hand with Polish identity. So people who are Polish are not just some Slavs. I know that everybody likes to bunch Slavs into a similar group, whether you're on Twitter, 4chan, or any other depraved place. But the fact of the matter is there's a massive difference between the different Slavic groups. And I'm no expert on this subject, but Polish people are not Russian people. Poles are not Russians. So the Polish identity was intrinsically tied to Catholicism. Even if communism was the state religion and the manifestation of political ideology, the culture of Catholicism was still there. And so that was not present at all in Russia. Now, for Russia, Orthodoxy had been part of the culture for a long time, but Russia, as many of you will know, did not receive communism from somewhere else and then begrudgingly become communist. Its own people fomented this revolution. Its own people threw off Orthodoxy, or at least a large portion of them. Of course, there was the White Army that fought against the Red Army. Those in the White Army would have been pro-Tsar, or at least pro-Orthodox and against communism. But they failed and they lost, and tens of millions were killed. So a large portion of Russian society was backing the Red Army, or was part of the Red Army itself. The people that stormed the Winter Palace were mostly Russians. This is totally different to in Poland, where communism was introduced by foreigners, the Soviets, Russians, and other non-Russian Soviet authorities, such as Stalin, who himself was a Georgian. Anyway, a little off topic. They brought it in. So communism was not invented in Poland. It wasn't really invented in Russia either. But the people themselves overthrew their own monarch and overthrew their own temporary republic after the monarch. And they stormed their own palace and they set up communism. We cannot compare this to Poland, with a hatred of their own background and their own culture to the extent that the Russians had. So for the Poles, Catholicism was still an intrinsic part of being Polish, even if it was no longer seeing massive crosses, crucifixes in the sky, or having the guy do the sign of the cross before having a political meeting. Catholicism was still in the heart of Poland. So that's a completely different scenario to Russia, who, as I said already many times, destroyed their own nation for communism. In addition to that, just because a people is Christian does not automatically mean that everybody's going to have a uniform identity. You can look at that throughout many different religions in the world. There are Muslim countries that are the exact same denomination, and one of them will be significantly more religious than the other. For example, Kazakhstan, which was a formerly Soviet communist country, compared to Pakistan. Pakistan is significantly more religious than Kazakhstan, even though Islam is being revived in Kazakhstan, as I've recently learned. So that is one of the reasons why we can see that Orthodoxy and the morality of Russia, Ukraine, and other nations is not as strong as Poland. A second reason is because Catholicism, as I said, was intrinsically part of Poland, came back to Poland quite quickly after communism was gone. It was not even a struggle whatsoever. Whereas when the Soviet Union fell, it wasn't like, all right, we all got to be Orthodox again in Russia. For a long time, Russians didn't know where their nation would go. They didn't know if they wanted to be Orthodox again, or if Orthodoxy would revive. The revival of Orthodoxy in the amount of media promotion, in the amount of physical, real-life promotion, in the promotion of good, strong family and traditional values, has only been going on for about 12 years, maximum. So for about 12 years now, Putin has been promoting Orthodoxy to increase birth rates, increase tradition, increase love and patriotism for the homeland, and to fix the problems that Russia has. So they've only been reviving based orthodoxy for about a decade, maybe slightly more, whereas Poland and other countries in Europe either never lost their Catholicism or have just watered it down, but never went through actually divorcing it from the society completely, as Russia did, which also applies to Ukraine and other countries. So that's one of the primary reasons that Russia is not as based and trad as people would say. And this is the kind of the crux of the argument here. But just because Russia possesses a lot of Orthodox Christians does not make it an Orthodox Christian country yet. So just because Putin is bringing up Orthodoxy does not mean Russia is a total Orthodox country yet. So let's look at it like this. We have the West here. The West was very Christian. This is the bar. So this is the minimum bar for being Christian. The West was up here. The West has come all the way down, but they're not totally atheist yet, because many people in the West are religious and have not abandoned it, and in some ways religion could be reviving in parts of the West. So the West used to be here. They're coming down here, but they're not totally atheist yet. Totally atheist would be down there. So Christian, they were up here, and now they're going down. But they're not totally atheist yet. Russia was totally atheist. They were once up here, then they went totally atheist. Now they're coming up. So right now, Russia and the West are about here. They're actually not that different in terms of religiosity when you look at it that way. The difference is that Russia is becoming Orthodox, and Russia is promoting Orthodoxy, and the leader and the politicians of Russia are not against Christianity, and they don't mock Christianity, and they don't shame Christians or try to eradicate religious law. So even if both of them are around here, and people say you can't like Russia, it's not trad and based, we like Russia because it is growing in its dominion over Orthodoxy and reviving it now. That doesn't mean it has already been revived completely. It means it is in the process of becoming Orthodox. And that applies to a lot of other Orthodox nations that were under the communist boot. Just because a country says, hey, the majority religion here is Orthodoxy, does not automatically mean everyone is going to adhere to it properly. For example, look at the difference between Romania and Bulgaria. Bulgaria is significantly more secular than Romania, even though they're neighbors and they were both Orthodox. Every situation is different. So my response to be with people who are attacking Orthodoxy using the Russia argument, A, Russia is not all of Orthodoxy, but it's a very important part. B, they had a historical reason for not being Orthodox anymore. And C, while other countries may be lingering on to some religiosity, it is dropping, whereas Russia is gaining. So even if Russia is below these countries now, they're dropping and Russia is gaining. So in the long run, we like to see presidents and leaders who are in favor of Christianity. Yeah, so that's the attack for Russia there. It's always Russia is always the only thing in Orthodoxy they attack. The second attack against Orthodox being trad and based would be something like in Greece, where we have the Elpidorphos scandal. And again, that's why we don't have a pope. We don't believe in one man being solely responsible for every single thing in the entire religion. Because then you end up with, what if he's not like a good person? What if he's not properly Orthodox? What if he's not a lowercase o Orthodox Catholic? Then you end up with priests, bishops, or even in the worst case, a pope who is not sticking to the actual religion. And so that's why with this whole idea of having a bad Orthodox priest here and there, we can get rid of them like that. And it's no problem to us because, hey, the guy's not the pope, excommunicate that guy, or ignore him, or don't follow him anymore, or leave him. Any number of things could happen. And by the way, that guy that did that baptism was also treated with very, very, very harsh words from the actual Orthodox elders in Greece. So the priests and the bishops who were present there, they completely rejected it and said we were not told in advance that this would be occurring. So for anybody saying that Greece approved of that, they didn't. Anybody saying that guy represents all of Greece, he doesn't. So we can't use that as an excuse. Or better than that, I could pull up pictures of transgender youth pastors in Protestantism, or lukewarm, soft Catholics who are totally fine with promoting LGBT stuff and saying, yeah, God made you gay, so just suffer through it and be gay and it's fine and you'll get to heaven. And none of it matters anyway because we're all ecumenist. Those kind of Catholics and those kind of Protestants, we could all be throwing that at each other. But the thing is, with Orthodoxy, we have less bad seeds. May not all be saints, but we have less of this so-called lukewarmness that I've talked about so much on my channel, at least compared to the other Christian denominations. So when people attack the trad and baseness of Orthodoxy, your response should be, A, there's a historical precedence for Russia. You can't just show a meme picture. Also, little known fact, that abortion, morality, HIV map thing with Russia and Europe, that's from like 2011. If you look at the updated map, abortion rates have actually fallen a lot in Russia and Ukraine. So you can't use a map from like 12 years ago. Just like 12 years ago, Orthodoxy was not booming as it is now in Russia. So again, time, context, proper resource. If Catholics and Protestants want to attack Orthodoxy for communism being spread in the Orthodox lands of Europe, then they have no room to talk, because the Enlightenment spread throughout Western Europe, and that has led to the secularism of today. And it could be argued actually that neoliberal capitalist materialism has been worse morally and traditionally for mankind than even communism. As bad as communism was, look at a map of Europe and comparison of different issues like LGBT, transgenderism, whatever. You'll see that all the formerly communist nations, whether Catholic or Orthodox today, completely reject these almost wholesale. Whereas all of the free and we're allowed to be Christian nations in Western Europe, who saw massive neoliberalism, materialism, capitalism, and religion reduced down to something you only do once per week maximum, in those nations, they completely destroyed themselves and they are now bankrupt morally. Those Catholic and Protestant lands gave us the Enlightenment, and we all know how that's turned out. So I think those kind of arguments are stupid. You can't use the argument of Orthodoxy invented communism, because we'll just throw the secularism and Enlightenment back at you. You can't say, well, Orthodoxy is all, Russia is all of Orthodoxy, and Russia is morally bankrupt, so you can't be Orthodox anymore. There are plenty of Catholic nations that are extremely lukewarm and abiding by things that, even though they're not abortion, HIV, or drug related, they're more related to bankruptcies of the heart and of the gender and of the sexes. I mean, look at Western Europe. Look at all these nations that are nominally Catholic, and what kind of ideologies are they spreading? In Spain, feminism is like out of control. In France, I don't even want to talk about France, and it's just looking very bleak. And look at the UK, Britain, religiosity is what, like 5% of the country? So these are the people that are attacking the east of Europe for inventing Orthodoxy, or they're attacking Russia for having a high drug or alcoholism rate. Well, at least Russians are not dressing up their little children, their little boys, as little girls and sawing off their body parts. We could sit here and fling dust at each other all day about who is more based in trad. The truth of the matter is, this world is very flawed, and none of us have created the utopian perfect society, no country on earth. So the question is, which path will lead us to becoming the better person? And additionally, history is not theology. One last thing I have to say. History is not theology, and if you want someone to talk more about that, go watch Jay Dyer's streams, where he does not always talk about theology. He talks about geopolitics, culture, and history. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the whole based and trad issue. Orthodoxy is still returning and being revived in a lot of nations. It took some time, and most of them are now Orthodox. Russia, even though it's the largest one, you would think, oh, they'd become Orthodox first. They're actually one of the later Orthodox countries to boom in Orthodoxy, believe it or not. Romania returned to Orthodoxy faster than Russia did. Russia is returning, and it still has quite a lot of Orthodox Christians, but it is reviving it in a much better way. And again, this is like a 12-year-old project. It hasn't been going on that long. So you have like 90 years of pure atheism, and then 12 years of religiosity, and people are still attacking Russia for not being religious enough. When you look at it in that mind, this much atheism and that much religiosity, you've got to give them a little time to get their act back together, as are a lot of post-communist countries getting their act back together. But Russia had the worst fare of all. The West, their problem may be moral bankruptcy, like I already said, like child drag queen shows and all that kind of stuff. And the East, their problem is not that, but they have problems that are more simple and in some ways even more deadly. They have problems that need to be fixed immediately. So when we say orthodoxy is based in trad, we don't mean every Orthodox country is a utopia, and like this is like paradise on earth. These are still normal post-nationalism, post-World War II countries which have a plethora of problems. These are all New World Order countries that happen to be majority Orthodox. Like A lot of countries in Latin America happen to be Catholic, and there's millions of Catholics there, and I'm sure many of them are very, very religious. But the entirety of their identity and the entirety of the identity of that nation does not rest only on Catholicism. So that's a distinction we have to make. Sorry for the rant. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this Jeem video. This is the start of No Shave November. So a few videos from now, I should have a little more of this. We'll see. All right. See you guys.